Why don't you tell me who you are and what you do?
Hi. Well, first of all, Andrew, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again. I'm Kristoff DuBose, the co-founder of ReKreate, and we create digital twins to accelerate the leasing process and decomplicate the procurement process for offices. Currently in London, it takes 6 to 8 months to procure offices, and we aim to do that in 6 to 8 weeks. Landlords, there's 30 million square feet of empty space. That void is an economic crisis waiting to happen if we don't do something quickly. And 30 million square feet of empty space is not going to be solved one viewing at a time, waiting in the lobby for someone to find the keys. It's just, we need to open it up to an infinite number of viewings, anytime, day or night, from anywhere in the world. And you might say to me, yeah, Kristoff, that's very fanciful. But if you look at Airbnb, that's what's available. People are expecting as a way to tour properties online and to be able to see, really what they're getting. Now, Airbnb is built on photographs, so you can't quite do that with offices because, just showing a picture of an empty floor, which everyone doesn't really mean anything to businesses. There's necessarily a capital expenditure project to turn an office into a usable state for a business. And so that's what our platform and our technology allows for, is that we create these environments that people can tour and experience and get to know better than they can with just some line diagram plans and a picture of an empty floor. It's really important to understand that the larger market can't consume that information. So we've got to stop presenting it to them in that way. And our platform is tied to procurement. So we are creating construction documents that necessarily change the visuals. So with one stroke of a keypad, we're not only changing our procurement documents, we're also changing the visuals, and that is really important. That truth in visuals, which we'll get onto in a bit later. But we can't stress enough just how important it is that truth in visuals gets reinstated.
Right. Yeah, because sort of now that I'm hearing it, we did actually record this earlier and I didn't press record on audio. So I actually had a chance to think through it, actually. So the question might be better. Yeah. So the question, that's what I sort of visualize with you, that the way things were and the way things are now with you. So I'm a landlord, I want a new office space. Normally, I'd get the plans, sort of architectural plans that are kind of useless for visualization.
Yeah.
And then you might get some shots, some still images, maybe a rendition of what you are going for.
Yeah.
And then maybe some tactile feels of the materials.
Yeah.
So that was sort of before, but nowadays, you're giving them a sort of a more immersive experience, or you're not asking them to try and imagine something, that you're just giving them the full imagination already lived, sort of realized. So you just have to experience it by going to the website, watching the footage of how you would experience this office that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
So it's way easier to get to the point where you can connect with your new office.
Correct. I think that's the mistake that we're making as an industry, that a picture of an empty floor plan and a line diagram of a floor plan is enough for someone to make a very expensive decision. It's not even close. And in the years past, we've given those still images, those CGIs, and it's not that it's anybody's bad or it's anybody's fault, but they're a lie. We've accepted that the visuals are a lie, that they're not the truth. Now there are some bad actors in there that's they're going to put an extra meter on the ceiling to embellish things and take creative license. But most part, what happens is you get a process whereby, because still images are expensive to create, and they're more sort of like a panorama of a particular view. They're not part of a digital twin that's been fully built. We're just literally building the scene. right? So if you turn the camera around 180 degrees, you'd see, a big vastness of nothing, right? So you just literally like a TV studio, when they build the set for Friends, right? There's the studio audience, and then there's the set. Well, that's kind of what happens in the world of, that's exactly actually what happens without the studio audience, of course. But it's just literally the cardboard box with 3 sides. That's how visuals are created in our industry. And if you want to change those visuals, they're super expensive every iteration that you make, because it's a lot of time for someone to change lights and materials law. And what happens is someone sees the visual, then they start making changes, and you go through each of those little changes are going to cost you £500, £1,000 or more to get changed to the visual. So people don't spend that money. They just go through all these little changes, and they figure we don't need to update the visual for this little change or that little change, and then that little change, and then those 5 little changes, and then those 10 little changes. And you get down the road, and something is necessarily changed, and then it's looking very different than the visual, and the client hasn't understood the implications of the changes and that it's going to change the nature of the visual. No one's made a change to the visual, and so the client feels lied to. And that break of trust is so bad especially for the landlord, right? Because then if the landlord's busy because landlords these days are trying to build relationships with clients, with tenants. The worst thing you can do to poison that relationship is give them a visual that doesn't translate into reality. They feel conned and cheated. And when you spend that amount of money, it's a really, really bad scenario. So the way we build our visuals is via the construction documents. You will not be able to procure something that looks different than the visual, because it is, that carpet that we put down, it is the specification of carpet, and we have scanned it from the catalog. We have scanned everything, and it's not just enough, and it's not just enough to scan the stuff from the catalog. We've had to tile it properly so it shows up appropriately in the render, and it does all that sort of stuff. It's really taken years and years and years to get to this point. And for us, that's the value of digital twins, right? And it takes a lot of effort to do the stuff up front, a lot of effort that most people aren't willing to deal with, because they're not thinking 9 steps down the road. They're only thinking 1 step down the road. We're thinking 9 steps down the road. And 5-10 years ago with digital twins, you had to think about what your one end deliverable needed to be, and then you'd work backwards from there. You couldn't possibly have 2 different end deliverables. It's a simplified way of putting it. It's either creative or technical. And so you either take a technical route and you build your model from that, or you take a creative route and you build your model from that. One's going to be highly disciplined, one's going to be very flamboyant and creative. And but now we're able to give both, and it's a really highly disciplined route, so that way you can be and then we have a single source of truth, and you can begin to with a single keystroke further downstream not only change your documentation, your area schedules, your cost plan, but also the visual for someone. And it's necessarily one and the same. So you have a single source of truth, and that not only does it speed up the relationship, does it speed up the cycle, but it also reduces the complexity, and it jealously guards that trust between the landlord and the tenant, which is absolutely vital, and especially in the world's market today, where there's where offices are in question whether or not you need them or not.
Yeah, so we talked about we wanted to ask about due to the way the world's changed now after COVID, or we should probably call it a different thing. The event of 2020. What's happened to office build-outs, office rentals in London and in the cities? Is there what's the market like at the moment?
So I think what's the market like for offices in London? And I think that is such a pertinent question, and it's the one everyone's asking. It's interesting, right? There's obviously the battle going on between the remote-only people and the office-only people, and that whole debate is completely missing the point. The offices are meant to be a place of exchange, of ideas, of people coming together, and far too often they've been used in the past to be just literally production hubs. Rows and rows of desks with people with their head down and working, and they call it the water cooler moment because that's the only place where you're allowed to be free of your desk. And that is what we call a commodity office, and I think everyone agrees that is dead, without doubt. But it doesn't mean offices are dead. Just the commodity office wasn't the only kind of office, right? Just like working from home isn't the only kind of remote working that you can do, right? Remote working can include working in a taxi cab. It can include working in a cafe or a lounge or even a bar, or in the airport, at the lounge, on the airplane, in a client's office, on a construction site. Remote working can be any one of those things, and I've worked in all of those areas and more. Offices are still very much a vital part of business, but they're not the core part of business anymore. I remember when we moved Zoom into their first offices in 2018, we started talking to them in February of 2018 and moved them into their offices in August, which was super fast. Now, when we started talking to them, they didn't have an office picked, they didn't have a lease signed. We were still doing feasibility for them and writing reports on, which space, would be better. And that was such a fast pace in this market that I was getting calls from all corners of the market going, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? Now, in a lot of ways, the technology that we have at ReKreate was, a crude version of that is what we used, and it's what allowed us to be that fast. And when Kelly Steckelberg, the CFO, came over after opening the office, and she was on her IPO tour, we sat down for lunch, to talk about how it went. And I was thinking, great, this is gonna be a victorious lunch. I was really excited to have a conversation about how quickly we moved them in. And as soon as we ordered the hors d'oeuvres and the waiters, scurried away, she turned to me and she said, I can't believe there's a market for offices in this town. It takes so long. And I went, whoa. I thought this was going to be a victorious lunch, Kelly. I mean, we outpaced your own AV people. And she goes, no, you were great. You were fantastic. Just, it's so difficult in this market. She said, I would really think twice if I ever, went looking for an office again. And that says something. And when you take that and you look at 30,000 square feet of empty space, she's not wrong, right? Clearly, people have had it. But there's another sort of lagging indicator. It's a really interesting clue, right? That tells you about what's happening in the market. The flex market is absolutely booming. Landlords that have a flex offering in their stack, they can't seem to find a ceiling on how much to charge for it, because A, there's not enough stock, but B, it's what everybody wants right now, because everyone's experimenting with different ways of working, and they need that experimentation to be somewhat consequence free. You don't need to be tied into a 20-year lease to do that, right? Not sure how much space they need, so they can use the flex product to do that, and it's absolutely booming right now. And it also tells you that it's not that people don't want offices, it's that people don't want the hassle. They want to just get on with it. They want to be able to come in and move in and see what they're going to get. They don't want to be shown a picture of a big empty floor plan with shiny floors and shiny ceilings. And they don't want to be handed a line diagram of what a potential office could look like with, nothing on it, maybe a little bit of shadow, but that's about it. They need to experience what it's going to look like. Now, the problem is the Cat A plus market, quote unquote, is besieged with issues. Because in some ways agents are right. People do need to see it and feel it. The problem is what happens once they see and feel it and realize they want to change it. So a landlord has just literally spent 65, 75 pounds a square foot doing this Cat A plus, and now someone wants to come in and change it, so they need to add another 25. So you're going to be spending north of £1 million by the end of it, and there's still no guarantee. For a 10,000 square feet space, there's still no guarantee that someone's going to actually take it. It's just a lot of money to spend on a hunch. Now with us, it's a fraction of that. And ReKreate are building these Cat A pluses, but digitally, so that people can tour and they can see what they're going to get before they sign the dotted line. They can even make those changes quite rapidly. Not themselves, obviously, they work through us, but they can see what they're going to get. They can make those changes rapidly, and then sign on the dotted line, and then it's just a matter of weeks until it gets delivered. And that is the defining part of what we're trying to achieve, is to get these offices back online and back working.
Yeah, I can imagine the flex thing being so big right now. It seems like a lot of people have some juice in their system to try out their business ideas. So who's going to rent an office that they have no idea if they're going to need it in a few months?
Yeah.
The commitments can't be made.
Yeah, that's right. Things are changing so rapidly. Also, there's 4 inflection points that are impacting real estate right now, and in an industry that never had any inflection points. The first inflection point is, obviously the changing nature of work. The fact that you don't necessarily need to be in the office every day. So businesses are still trying to figure out, who comes in, when they don't come in. And we'll talk about that a little bit later to give your listeners a little bit of an insight onto, what we're seeing is who does come in and who doesn't necessarily need to, and who might need to be encouraged to, a little bit more frequently than they do. But we'll get that into another segment. But that's causing a lot of voids, which is causing a lot of the devaluation of assets. And you're seeing a lot of big, funds walk away from buildings because they just can't get, the income, and it's the income that underpins the value. The second thing is the changing interest regime, and it is completely under it's ripped the carpet out from under the feet of so many landlords and REITs well, just mainly landlords that have financed these their portfolio in one way, and now have to find a different way to finance it. And you need that income anyway to deal with that issue. And then the third inflection point is the inflation costs, especially in this particular market, but it's global, of construction. So it's massively changing whether or not you really do want to do a speculative fit out, because this is actually costing a lot more than it used to. It's not necessarily delivering on what it said it would, and I'm gonna have to pay more in the end, and all of that sort of stuff. So you need to conserve cash, and that's not something you do when you're conserving cash. And then the final thing is the final inflection point is the decarbonization and sustainability agenda, which is creating legislation which is massively changing the way you need to deal with these assets. I mean, 40% of emissions comes from commercial real estate, and so you need to really think about that. I think 40% of emissions coming from real estate. You really need to think about that. And how we do things slightly differently. And the BCO have said outright that Cat A and Cat A Plus is wasteful and it needs to stop.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting an interesting backlash, I think, in our area for builders who can't dump their waste.
Yeah.
They just dump it right in the middle of the road,
Yeah.
fly tippers, and they block the whole road.
Yeah.
And there's, wealthy people around. There's Range Rovers queued up waiting for for rocks to be removed from the road. But the truth is, when I go, if we try and do the full recycle everything at home, there's half the stuff that they won't accept at the recycling centre.
Yeah.
So surely there must be something needs to be unblocked so we can actually recycle every possible thing.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think for the waste in construction is something that's also part of the haste in the process. And so again, this is what a digital twin allows you to be strategic about. So we're able to leverage different spaces, and even the roughest of offices can be refurbished into something new and wonderful without undoing all the plumbing and the electrics and the mechanical. There's we can do slide up when we've done that before in the past, and we've confused often the flight to quality as the flight to new, right? And that's not necessarily the right answer. That's not necessarily the right thing. We've seen quite a bit of that tailing off because that's a lot of money to spend on a gamble whether or not it's going to be able to bring your people back into the office. And oftentimes we've seen, taking an older asset and doing a really good job on the refurbishment, which costs much less than a whole new scenario. That tends to be more interesting for people and bring more people back because it's got a lot more character. And so, with digital twins, we can be really smart about that because we're mapping out all the different things. We're seeing it in 3D. We can create these assets. They have intelligence in themselves. So we can understand what we're taking out, what we're leaving in, and make better decisions on that basis. That's part of the embedded carbon piece. So if we don't have to rip out too much, if someone's telling you need to rip out the raised access floor and put a new shiny one in, I mean, don't listen to them. Cross the road, because that is one of the biggest travesties about our industry. And there's some really smart landlords, Derwent and Landsec. They're using recycled raised access floors. I mean, no one cares what the raised access floor looks like until once the carpet is on top of it. I mean, honestly, so we don't need to be doing that. And when you look at what those landlords are doing, that it just fills your heart with joy, because that is more of an intelligent use of an asset and understanding what the end goal is. We're not selling people an empty box. We're selling them the potential of a functioning office that forwards the objectives of their business. And oftentimes as well in our industry, we've got people making visuals that are stunningly beautiful, have completely forgotten the purpose of what they're for. We're not selling the visual. We're selling the opportunity for a business to turn that space into an office that will further their objectives. That's ultimately what it needs to be tied to, which is why we tie it to the procurement. And by tying the visual to the procurement, we can be so much more efficient in terms of how we order materials and how much we're not way over ordering on materials because someone sat there with a scale rule and done some calculations and added a whole bunch of fat just in case. We know exactly how many square meters you need. We also know how much you need because of the wastage calculations. We've actually done that before in the past. Funny story. Ordering exactly the number of carpets that was there, but then having an entire meeting room without any carpet because we hadn't thought about the cutoffs. So at ReKreate, we've stepped on all those landmines, and we can, we filter all that out. And we know the different wastage for different materials. We know what those are, and that's part of our IP, and that's built into our schedules. That allows for us to create that ordering schedule, right? And that so in terms, part of why we have all that waste in construction is because we're not thinking like that. We're busy just ordering more than we need, so that we're not stuck, and then when the project's over, oh well, let's get rid of it somehow. And instead of because when you're creating a digital twin, essentially what you're creating is a really sophisticated database. And that's the inside baseball of why digital twins are important. You've got the best CRM system for your building in terms of what you've just procured, if possible. And so for us, that's where the next steps is carbon passports. Now that we've got the digital twin, that is the actual wall, that is the actual floor, that is the actual ceiling, we can start to make an instant actionable decisions on how we go about and use those things. And we can track all of that. So that the model, instead of just being descriptive, the model becomes analytical, so that we can gather deep insight on that. And over time, after being analytical over time, our model can then be predictive. And that's the holy grail. We need to get to that point where our model can be predictive. And that's that, but we can't even get there unless we start by using the model to get to procurement.
So how do you present your digital twin to the potential customer?
Yeah.
And how is that better than what we had before with the VR goggles and all that?
Yeah, sure. Great question on the digital twins and how we present them. Now, we have 3 different ways of presenting these virtual environments. There is the online guided tour. There is the in real life augmented reality, and there is what we call the workshop viewing. And they all have different points and different uses in that sense. Now, at the top of funnel, so we work on behalf of landlords because landlords are under a lot of strain at the moment, and the Cat A+ market isn't helping that strain. So we're looking to alleviate that. And by supporting landlords, we're also supporting businesses because if that relationship is close and solid, and businesses are getting what they need without having the huge hassle of going through a massive, deep, long design process, then we can actually get to something quite potent for all sides. I don't think anybody benefits from the whole process being dragged out, except for maybe the lawyers. But lawyers' jokes are a bit cliche these days. So the what we call the marketplace visuals, the guided tours, we work with ex Channel 4 ITV producers to create cinematic versions of the walkthrough. The whole point being, I'm not a very good gamer, so when I walk through these things, it's very clumsy. We see a lot of our competition creating these, sort of walkthrough situations where you've got to figure out what keys to use and how to use your mouse and where to look and all that sort of stuff. And half the time you find yourself in a storage cupboard and you don't know how to get out, and it's just peace, I'm out. People bounce, and that's not what anybody wants. So we create guided tours. It's just as simple as an infinite scroll. You just scroll your mouse down, and you're taking through, a narrative, a story of how it all comes together as a piece. Now, making that first visual really easy for people to consume, that is really important to us, because people don't have a lot of time, and again, like the Airbnb market, they're expecting to be able to whittle away all these different options very rapidly, so they can literally scroll through, see what they're going to get, see what they're going to what they like, and if they like something but there's a few changes they want to make, they can see how they would want to make them, and then they can have that communication with us, and then go into a workshop should they be serious. The on-site visuals, the assets that we create is basically QR codes that you can scan and get an augmented reality on when you're actually on the premises. So you scan with your phone, and then you can see, and then making that see what you're going to get, and making that connection between what's existing and what's proposed is really, really valuable. And I just see it time and time again. A spark lights up when someone's able to make that creative connection in their own mind. And it's amazing what happens, how people get motivated, they get interested, they cannot wait to see what they're now imagining become, true to life. That's part of the best part of this whole job, is what was once in your imagination all of a sudden becomes the reality that everyone else lives in. And it's something quite powerful when you see clients and occupiers kind of get that same bug. And that's, and through those in real life assets, so, on site, you can then see what you're going to get. That's another level of asset that we provide that allows people to experience it. And then the third thing is the workshop tours. So that's where you are you sort of, you can look left, you can look right, you can look down and see how many legs a table has, and make those changes, make changes in the finishes. Now, we've not only have we scanned extensive finishes and furniture library, we've also cleaned it up so it keeps our models tidy and things like that. So that's a whole process that's in our IP. But also we've tiled the images so they tile correctly and stuff like that. It's not just enough to just go and scan the stuff. You have to do this properly and create something that works really well and tiles well and doesn't look horrible. That workshop tour is there so that we can make those live changes and updates. It's a limited thing. We're in the driver's seat with the occupier, literally as navigator, working to tell us what they like, what they don't like. And what the amazing thing is then they can be creative. One of the most important parts of the creative process is the eraser. So if I look at a pencil, I'd say the eraser is the most important part of that, because the ability to make those changes as you go is a really, really important part of the whole thing. And when clients are able to try something out, and you let them, sometimes they come up with ideas that aren't the best, but you let them out of respect, and also just to encourage that creativity. And they see what they thought that they wanted, and they realize it doesn't look very good. You can just undo it, and it goes back, and there's no consequence. Contrast that with coming up with an idea, sending your architects away. A week later, they come back, they present it. It's not very good, and there's been a whole big bum fight over the fees and stuff like that. So then you say, "Oh, actually, I don't like that after all." So they have to return back, and all of this work has to be done. Not so much anymore. It's literally a keystroke, literally Control Z, and you're back to where you were before. And you should see what happens. The creativity unfolds, the elements. And so when people go, "Well, why didn't you try that thing?" You can say, well, we did. It didn't look very good. A perfect example, we had a client, she wanted the cupboards that were sort of dividing the desks to be the same finish as the desktops, which was a sort of distressed oak sort of look. And when we did that, the cupboards at that point were this like kind of creamy white sort of putty color. And when we did that, we changed the cupboards to be the same as what was there before, because she was really banging on it. we really want consistency. We did that. She looked at it. She was like, ooh, it's all a bit too much, isn't it? I was like, yeah, it's all inhale, no exhale, And so, she's like, yeah, totally. So, and she goes, I'm so sorry. I was like, no big deal. Watch, on Control Z, boosh, it was back to the same. It's like, oh, okay. And a way, and all you should have just seen the way she opened up and just started going through a million different iterations and just looking at all the different things. And she got everything she wanted. We literally went through. And I remember somebody I was with at the time said to me, he was a former asset manager at the Crown Estate. And he said to me, he was actually in the room with us. And he said, do you realize what you just did there? And I was like, yeah, I mean, we had a really happy client. And he goes, no, you just compressed 6 weeks worth of design period into 2 hours. I was like, yeah, I know, that's pretty good, isn't it? And then he goes, no, that's going to be valuable to the landlord as well. I was like, how come? And then that's how I learned about net operating income and how assets are valued. And that is, which is why we've pivoted and focused on landlords. But through landlords, we are now servicing clients, which just creates that bridge. We have. So if you've noticed, in all three of those, we never once wheeled out the virtual headsets. We have a couple of pairs actually, and with a very thick layer of dust on them. And the reason being, we used to use them quite a bit, and they are somewhat effective. But there's two problems. One, you lose your audience, right? So I'm with the CEO of Splunk, and I say, okay, Doug, do you want to see what you're about to get? And he's like, yes, please. And then I go, okay, Sam, and I handed it to someone in his entourage. It was a thing I used to do to kind of gin up the interest, and hand it on his entourage, who's really happy to see, puts the goggle, doesn't realize that the CEO is literally there, bursting out of his skin wanting to see this thing, and he puts it on and he's looking around, and Doug's going, what do you see, Sam? What do you see? And he goes, oh, I see the space. It looks amazing. And Doug's like going out of his mind because that doesn't really tell him a story, right? That doesn't tell him what he needs to know. And so then, literally, when Sam pulls it away, Doug literally grabs it on his face and then puts it on, and all that's well and good, and it's all fun, but then Doug gets cyber sickness. So he has to pull away because it's just a bit and it's not the bit that's one of those things that then it starts to get really awkward when the person's not feeling well, and now they're making that association between what you've done and the sick. And so it's just for that reason alone, we've had enough people. I mean, that particular scenario, that particular individual didn't get cyber sickness, but the key there, though, and that's why I was doing things that way, is because once the decision maker puts their those goggles on, you lose them. The whole room just has to sit quietly and it's an awkward moment, and you kind of lose a little bit of the magic, and and with those assets that we've got, where you're seeing where you scan a QR code and using your phone or an iPad to get an augmented version, augmented reality version of what what you've got in front of you and what you could have in front of you. That part's much more powerful. Making that, seeing those two things in the same time, in the same frame, is a lot more powerful than completely dispensing with the old and only looking at the new. So we find that's we wouldn't recommend the virtual goggles, and it's just
I had to do I did the last podcast, but with Flickr, and I had a cheap graphics card, and I didn't know that was the weak point on my computer. I had just upgraded the whole thing except that, because I thought, I don't need a gaming card upgrade, I'm not gaming. Yeah. So I just left the graphics card in there. Doing the edit, Flickr happens like that, and then I find a plugin that can fix it, but it's massively graphic intensive. I try and run the render at the end. 16 hours wait time, it says in there. I'm thinking,
what the hell?
So I leave it for 16 hours. I come the next day.
Corrupted.
No, it worked, but something happened at the end that wasn't perfect. So even if I left it to the end, it could crash, or it might break. Yeah. So I had to upgrade the graphics card, and it took an hour and a half after that.
Yeah, all day long. Worth it all day long. Yeah,
it's so worth it. I couldn't believe it.
Whatever that 1,200 quid was for the graphics card, whatever. Yeah, they're pretty. I've got a graphics card on my one because I have to. Obviously, I'm not the one doing all the work that of the modeling and the visual, but I'm demoing stuff. Yeah, and it's off of my machine that I'm running the workshop tours. And
it's funny you should say about the goggles, because I'm in a different world now with drones, and I'm getting into first-person view drones. Yeah. So you have to, in order to maneuver these things, you have to look from the eyes of the craft itself. Yeah. So you have a camera in the drone. Your helmet connects to the camera. Mm-hmm. So when you're flying, you are the drone.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And basically, no one does that unless they've trained, because they will just crash.
Completely.
So I'm in simulators now. Thanks to that amazing graphics card for the video rendering, I can run these simulators at full graphics, and I'm fully immersed. I don't even need the goggles when I'm practicing. I'm just watching the screen, and I'm learning to fly.
That's actually a good
point.
point.
And it's completely transferable.
Yeah.
As soon as I go 100%. Out with the real drone and the goggles, it's the exact same thing. Maybe the physics aren't perfect, so the gravity's a bit different in the simulator. But wow, it's you can become an expert, a complete pro, and you don't even have to use a real one.
Yeah, and you know that's one of the things in our platform why the model goes on to procurement, right? Because we're not just building pretty visuals. This is actually how it's going to be built, and that's part of what differentiates us, because it takes a lot of effort to build a visual the same way you would build in real life, right? So first of all, you need to know how to build. Second of all, you need to be an artist, you know, and know what looks good. But the beauty of it is, I mean, you touched on it with drones and simulations. We have a great historical touch point in aviation. Right, so many pilots before they even get on an airplane have done tons and tons of hours in a virtual walkthrough, a virtual studio of sorts, and it's the same for us. But although in real estate we're in terms of adoption of technology, we are light years behind aviation, but we can take what's successful for aviation in terms of going through those repetitions, those failures in a consequence-free environment, right? And then move into something that's a little bit more, it's got more, consequence to it. And I'm massively inspired by all of that. And there's a whole other thing that, about aviation, failure in aviation being data rich. Failure in real estate is data poor, because everyone's trying to pretend it never happened, and that's a real problem. But that's a conversation for another time. The importance, I can't stress enough the importance of having that virtual walkthrough for people that are actually going to be building this, not just for the tenants that are going to be moving in, not just for the landlords who are all of a sudden finding their process massively sped up, but also for the contractors that are going to be on site. I found it hugely useful for them to see the stuff in 3D. I found they were twice as fast, they were half the mistakes, and there was a lot more satisfaction, because they were like, look, it looks just like the visual, like they just get really excited by that. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to, they go, it doesn't look like the visual, because they were working to the construction documents, because that's what they're contracted to work to. But if they're working to the model that has all of that stuff integrated and it's all part of one thing, you got to see the satisfaction on their faces. It's just so good. And they're fat and they're accurate. And in fact, they're coming up with questions before they've even ordered a single box of cable, because they're looking at that going, oh, well, what about, how are you gonna do that, Gov? How are you gonna get around there? And you kind of look around and go, oh, you know what? I never thought of that. Why don't we solve it here? We are literally on site solving problems before we're on site. Do you see what I mean? Do you see the massive benefit of that? Not only in time, not only in cost, not only in satisfaction, but also the sustainability. I mean, we have a situation where we have all these problems, that we've outlined, that landlords are facing. The four things that landlords are facing: the changing nature of work, which is causing voids; the rising interest regime, which is massively changing the financials of an asset; the huge rise in construction costs, and also which you can't fix the rising interest regimes and the construction shock by rising the prices, because remember, you've got a void problem, right? You see, and then on top of that, the sustainability initiatives are coming in. So if you try to fight each one of those with some individual tool, you're going to be, you're going to be, going mad. So that's what we're after. Like, we can cut that Gordian knot. When you digitize those assets, you can get at all of those problems all at once in one shot, instead of trying to untie the Gordian knot. Just cut it open with a digital twin, and you see plenty of historical references to that as well.
Yeah, I think it's massively valuable to have it pure data driven, or source of truth driven. So like you were saying, you don't have to think about, you may go off a little bit on the design if you weren't locked to the blue. So that is, I'm seeing now how valuable that can be. You never have to question it again.
Yeah.
It's almost like, very in a different way, I guess, making music. And it's sometimes really hard to, you put your idea down and you listen back to it and you want to make changes.
Yeah.
Wait, before I make that change, what if I want to go back? What if it's 5 steps to make the change and hear the difference? And I didn't save the original, I didn't make it easy to step back. And so having something there that you can refer to that's not going to affect your experimenting. That makes creation like freer. Gives it more air,
100%.
More space, and 100%. It just feels better to create like that.
100%. And I think that a very smart man once said that in the creative process, you need low filters. You need lots of stuff coming in. You need lots of inputs and stuff like that. And you need to put out lots of stuff without too much judgment, so that you can just, and it's going through the reps. And in execution, you need high filters. You need, not a whole lot of inputs, so you need a narrow path, and going that way. Those two ways of working seem diametrically opposed, but actually when you put them together, it's stunningly beautiful. If you've got an execution platform that allows high filtration once it gets to that stage, but being funneled in through a creative process that has low filters, so you can have lots of inputs, and then you don't have to pull that out and put it somewhere else and then hand it over, right? Oftentimes what happens in our industry is the creative people do what they do, and the technical people get a hold of it and they just have to start all over again, like literally start drawing from scratch, because it's just so all over the place. But with ours, the way we integrate it, it causes there needs to be some discipline in it, but because it's crowdsourced, because it's single source, the technical people can support and underpin the creative people, while the creative people are doing what the creative people do. The technical people can just be underneath, providing that sort of backstop and just keeping everything, organized, so that by the time something gets to them, they don't have to start all over again. They can just literally then, put up their filters and execute, right? And that it's being able to leverage the best of both of those worlds that makes, a really, really powerful process. And somebody said to me once, very recently, what she recognized in what we're doing is very similar to the way we work. We're set up using, these environments, and almost looked identical. It's not identical because, I've never been to WeWork, but I know what WeWork were after. I know the metrics that they were wanting to track, and I know the software they were using, and I know that the people over here that they were working with did not want to use the same software that WeWork were using. So, but the thing we all agreed on was that, yes, that was the basis on which WeWork were able to move at such pace. It was that pace that blew everybody away. Now, the problem was that, when you have ridiculousness at high level, you are, accelerating that ridiculousness. That's part of the problem, right? That's part of the big problem that we've got with something like WeWork. But if you've got a good decision-making regime, and you've got a strong team with their feet on the ground, and a sobriety in their heads, and you have that ability of pace next to you, imagine the possibilities, right? And it's not just, and the thing about WeWork is they were literally using that to generate the design so that they could hand off to other people, and also gather the income of each asset, so they could understand their income opportunities. We can take that as well as the construction procurement, so you don't have to sit there and wait for somebody to redraw it in CAD, right? You can literally go off and procure it in that way. So that was the missing link for WeWork, and they had to hire other people to do it. And then those other people took a huge, big profit cut, and so it's just like, it became a bit of the weak link, but we removed that weak link and put all those things together, and helping people that are developing flex offices, for example, move that much faster, because A, it's the speed they need because there's an insatiable appetite, but B, if they can fill those offices in 6 months as opposed to 12 to 18, it completely changes the metrics of their business.
Yeah, it's funny how I never told you the name of the podcast, Endless Thirst.
Yeah.
And you basically lined it up exactly how I seem to find myself, the line between creativity and tech, and how it's sort of everywhere, right? But in your field, in design architecture, it's constant. It's all the time. It's like making a movie with your art people and your camera guys and stuff. It's you have to find a place where you can work together and all that energy can actually be successful.
Part of the reason, part of the reason real estate has struggled to adopt technology is because technology is built on what is replicatable, right? So you build one piece of software and you roll it out to millions of people who all use it, right? So you don't have to, and then you're spending money, tweaking it, improving it, adding new features and stuff like that. But frankly, it's the one of, right? It's the one thing that you do. And real estate, or automotive, you make one model and you ship 65 million units, and people, and that's what they've got. And you've got a factory where you just repeat. You cannot do that with real estate because every site is different, every ground condition is different, every weather condition is different, every site boundary is different. The planning and laws and regulations are different. And even when you've got a building, interiors, every business is different. Every unit within every business is different. Every industry is different. Do you know what I mean? It's impossible. It's always prototype, always. However, there are some things that are often the same, right? And you can create repeatable elements. Do you know what I mean? You can create templates so that those elements are often always used. Kitchens, using the right joinery from a certain manufacturer, or your flooring. If you've got templates and you go, these are the 3 ranges of timber that we use, these are the 5 ranges of carpets that we use. You can open it up to more, obviously, if you've got an AI stack and other things, but you keep it very limited, very simple. Then those things are on repeat. And then it's just a matter of how you deploy those particular assets in varying ways. Then it's not so much a repeat. I mean, it's impossible to do what Toyota makes a new RAV4 and ships 65 million units. We'll never ever be able to do that. However, when we create that template and that ability to reuse different things, and also in such a way that it doesn't look and feel the same, like cookie cutter all over, it does need to have enough variation so that it looks and feels quite different, because no one wants to go to the same place over and over again, unless it's a chain of some sort, because then they're expecting that look and feel. But offices need to speak to local culture and things like that. I did a rollout for Lehman Brothers that was very much cookie cutter, and it met a lot of resistance from local operators. They wanted their own. They wanted something that said something about them, and that's a really important piece. And you can even see ad campaigns, the way McDonald's will modify this exact same narrative, but they will change the clothes, they will change the office environments, they will change things for different markets, so that someone in Chicago looks. It's the exact same story of people, going away from lunch to go get some McDonald's, when as opposed to an office in Riyadh where they're in hijabs and but they're all doing the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, but you can't that is how you speak to a local market. It's you do need to make that stuff local. So and only through digital twins can we make that templatization joined with mass customization, right? It's only with a digital process can we do that in any efficient manner. Otherwise, we're going to have to have hundreds of people working on it and bloating our overheads and our costs and the costs onto the client. The whole point of this is to make it quick and fast, but without that quality compromise.
Right. So, if you want an office in London, you want to save time, speak to my man.
Come to ReKreate.com. We've got a few offices there, but when you reach out to the team, so there's 2 sides of it. Yes, we're working with landlords and we're putting up their stock, and we're putting in speculative digital offices in their stock. But we're also talking to tenants who want us to understand their brief, and we can take their brief and apply it to different locations. And mainly because these businesses don't want to give their requirements away to, 17 different people. It's exhausting. It's tiring. You don't have the time for that. And also, they don't want to go touring, 50 different locations with their entire senior leadership team. I mean, think how much that's costing you. To do it this way as a business owner, is just one of the fastest, most effective ways to get your ideas across without having to share it with the world and have your phone go and melt down because everybody's now all of a sudden prospecting you. Keep it tight, keep it close, but also you can keep it varied. You can look at lots of different options and understand the implications of each and make intelligent decisions on each, and create partnerships with your new landlord. That's probably going to be one of the most important things, because if that relationship is good with your new landlord, you've got an opportunity for success there, because then you're having a conversation about your growth or your not growth, and there'll be a foundation of trust.
Right. I either want to be a landlord or meet one soon. You inspired me more now.
You don't want to be a landlord right now, I promise you. Commercial landlords are embattled at the minute, and I feel for them, because they've never had to, right? They've never, and it's the last time there was an inflection point in commercial real estate was 1886 when steel was invented and you can make skyscrapers. I mean, there's been little stuff about BMS and stuff here and there, but that wasn't really an inflection point. That was more of a variation on a theme. Now with the way that the interest regime just changed overnight and undid so many financial products. The changing nature of work is a radical change. It's never happened before in anyone's lifetime, and which then leads to all sorts of stuff. And then the inflation going through the roof. That's happened before, but not quite to this level. And at the same time as all the other stuff, and on top of that, the environmental regulations. So you just, those four forces are just. They are a difficult one to figure out, and honestly, and this isn't a sales pitch or anything like that. If you're a landlord right now and you're hearing this, look into digital twins, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to deal with all four of those inflection points all at the same time. It doesn't have to be ReKreate, but find somebody, because that's, once you've digitized your asset, you'll have a lot more of an easier time getting your head around and managing and these assets.
I'm trying to find an AI that can do it. So far, the ones I've tried are rubbish. But my sister's tried one for her work, and she said it's so good that you can just put the whole podcast in and it will do it.
Really? Well,
give you that link.
Yeah.
AI is another one, isn't it?
I don't know about that. I think sometimes it gets lucky, and then it's a really good technology. It can leverage your work. I'm never comfortable giving it the work over. I think it can be a tool alongside you. It's like handing the framing of the house to a hammer, right? I mean,
I think AI is a bit like that joke hammer that hammers itself when you press the button.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to leave that house to then go frame, that hammer to go, make a cabinet on its own, right? No, you just, you need to leverage your aspect, and it's never going to have judgment, and that's what is key for, the human aspect of it, right? Like we need to, when you hand judgment over to the AI, it just it gets it wrong quite a lot, and in such a way that's quite dangerous.
I have a sort of issue with AI getting close to art. Yeah. I know there's some areas where, for example, if you just need a piece of art for your work, but the art itself isn't what you're creating, you don't really care, then it's just saving money from commissioning work from other people, from human beings. But when it comes to actually being a creator, it's an insult to the senses. Normally, if I hear an AI made beat or something to make music to, I'm hearing it and I'm thinking, I know there's something off about this. But the worst one is the AI humans. Welcome to our website, but it's not a real person. It's the lips, isn't it? There's something that gives it away and makes me so
creeped out. Totally 100% creeped out.
And all these people that could be doing this stuff, humans, suddenly, people are just going to go with the easy option. And thinking,
but no, that's what is striking in Hollywood.
Exactly.
But I think that I think the problem with that is again, I think there's always a tell with those things. And in some way, there was an AI, I think, that was made to look like a really bad cartoon, like really pixelated and stuff like that. She sounded really real, and her and everything else, but she was a parody on, really badly drawn computer generated image. So in some ways, you're telling the truth. Do you know what I mean? Which makes it a little bit more connected. When you're trying to replicate or replace, again, that's the thing, that trust level drops. Which is why I'm not that fussed with ReKreate to create perfect images. There's people out there absolutely fussed over what's the perfect image, but it's the image isn't what we're selling. That what we're selling is the opportunity for someone to get a really fantastic office, and for them to consume the design information in such a way that allows them to connect with that procurement in ways that they never could before. The visual in and of itself is not the end goal. But in fact, the more you try to make it the end goal, the more you could potentially cause a distrust situation. Do you know what I mean? Because it's so real. It's sort of like, you come in and it's not exactly the way that real thing looked. You're going to be, seen as not trustworthy.
You're reminding me of the feeling I got when the world switched from going into a shop to buy something and you buy it online. And there's that weird feeling if you don't know it, if you've never seen it, you're like, well, I guess I'm pressing buy because I need it, but I don't know if it's even going to do this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so then reviews can help and stuff. But really the world changed when YouTube started doing video reviews. That you could just type the thing, instead of Google it, just type it in YouTube, see 10, 20 people using the thing that you want to buy and telling everything about it. Yeah. That was so useful. The only problem is the algorithm monster. Right. Those people doing reviews, they get offers, they get promotional sponsorship offers. They realize if I talk about this, I get more money from YouTube, and then it's suddenly you don't know who to trust anymore. Yeah. So it's okay. There's
that little moment, right, where it's fresh and it's true, and then it gets corrupted somehow.
So there's always something, but I've actually found, at least some, you have to go fairly specialist. So like this microphone, for example, I already knew it was great, but I wanted to know if it was actually the best one to go for. And there are actual engineers who do the real thing, show you the real graphs if you want to go that geeky.
Yeah.
So it does still
exactly
exist.
The word I was going to say. Geek out on it, and it's it's worth. I mean, it's an important investment. It's worth doing the research. Then again, you can also return. I mean, the good thing about places like Amazon, their returns policy is phenomenal. And that's a trust maneuver, not necessarily a maneuver, but just allowing you to buy and offering up something like that in a big gambit that allows there to be trust, so that there are no stories of somebody not being able to return something on Amazon. I mean, that just doesn't. I mean, has anyone ever complained about that? Like, not ever, right? And when they did, it was because they waited 9 years, and then they couldn't return the sneakers that they've been wearing for 9 years, and then it's like, well, sorry, I mean, I'm afraid that's you're being cheeky there, But those moves of trust. Again, trust is so important. With Spotify, right? Like their whole big thing was the lack of trust in the music industry. There's a great episode on Masters of Scale about it, where they just sort of. The music industry worked really hard to shut down Spotify because they'd already dealt with Napster and stuff like that, and all of these torrent sites were still swirling around. So the music industry was absolutely embattled by digital, and didn't trust it at all. And so I think I've got a difficult thing getting landlords to adopt this technology. In some ways I don't, because there's a few people that have come before me that haven't been great, but have cleared the way for me to sort of go, this is why this is better. But also the inflection points that I mentioned is sort of forcing landlords to think differently about how they approach these things. But that's just a matter of complacency. This was out and out defensiveness, out and out disdain, and so what Spotify had to do is just absolutely open up, and share revenue and give that, to give that trust back, and that was a real strong opening gambit, really, from them to allow for a longer catalog, broader catalog of stuff. I mean, I remember when I first started using Spotify, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't on there. Now you go to Spotify, you really struggle to find something that's not, someone's properly holding out then at that point. But the important thing that Spotify did was get the trust of the industry that they were, I wouldn't say servicing, in some ways now servicing, and that trust is has paid dividends, right? And so they jealously guard it, and rightfully so, right? And it's the same thing. Landlords do need to, I think landlords have always been in a combative position with tenants in the past, and I think that's partly because of the culture, but partly because the agents really benefit from that situation, because but I think landlords are recognizing that that's not serving them anymore. Mm-hmm. So one of the best ways to get that trust is truth and visuals.
Awesome. Yeah.